We're joined today by State Representative Jesse Topper, House Republican leader. How are budget negotiations going so far?
We're slower than we would like, but that shows that we have some pretty complex problems that we have to deal with and some challenges that are facing us here in Pennsylvania. So it's very important that we get a quality product when it comes to policy and how the money is going to be appropriated. And that's going to take some time, but I am optimistic as talks continue to progress that, we will get to a resolution. Just it's not going to be as quick as everybody would have hoped, but we're still working to get there.
The federal budget was finalized over the weekend. Were there portions of state budget negotiations that were on hold until that federal budget was done?
No, not as far as I was concerned. We're working on changing the demographics here in Pennsylvania. We have our challenges that we need to meet. The federal government passed the largest tax cut in the history of America. So I think that hopefully will continue to grow our economy, both in Pennsylvania and around the country. But we have our own house to get in order. And I think that's been our focus from day one.
How will that federal budget affect state funding?
Well, look, if the economy continues to grow because of the tax cuts that are in that and a lot of the economic policies that will hopefully help drive economic growth in Pennsylvania and our surrounding states, I think it can only help us. Certainly, there are reforms to programs that we need to look at that we've been looking at for years. Change is tough, but at the end of the day, if budgets moving forward are not sustainable, then we're really putting that on the backs of our children and our grandchildren. So we need to make sure that everything that we have promised to folks is available and sustainable, and that comes with reform. So that's also part of what we're looking at, not just at the federal level, but at the state level.
One of the areas that's most anticipated to be affected by federal funding will be the Medicaid and loss of Medicaid funding. Will the state budget reflect any attempt to backfill some of those losses?
We've been talking about Medicaid reform since I've been before my time in the legislature. It's time that we address it so that it is sustainable and it meets the needs of our citizens that absolutely require Medicaid for their health care. In order to do that, the system has to be reformed. And we know that there are those who are currently accessing a lot of our entitlement programs that quite frankly shouldn't be. And we need to clean out the waste, the fraud, the abuse, and we need to ensure that the program's sustainable for those who so desperately need it. And that's our goal, is sustainability. And I believe that's what we're working towards here in Pennsylvania, as they are at the federal level.
Let's move on and talk about skills games now. There have been dueling bills to tax and regulate skills games at different rates. Could you talk a little bit about what you would like to see happen and where that issue stands right now in negotiations?
Look, I still think there's a chance for a gaming bill that allows all of the market to grow. And that's really what would help our revenues the most. If we're talking about state revenue, then you want a healthy gaming market. Certainly, we need to regulate and tax skill games, bring them into the light of the gaming industry. And I think if we do that in a responsible way, it can benefit all of us. The problem is right now it's trying to work through those details has been very difficult. But I think the best way to look at a gaming bill is to ensure that every sector of the market has the opportunity to thrive in Pennsylvania. Skill games, casinos, video game terminals. So whatever we can do to make that happen is what we're working towards in our little corner of the world here in the Republican caucus.
Mass transit agencies have threatened to raise fares and reduce services if they don't receive additional state funding. Where does mass transit funding stand right now?
First of all, they need to raise fares. I mean, part of the local share is a component of how SEPTA and the Southeast Transit System is going to survive. We know that in order to have a thriving economy in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia region, there needs to be a healthy mass transit system. And I'll go back to a word I used before, sustainability. We can't just keep pouring hundreds of millions of dollars and seeing the product decrease for the citizens in that area. We have to find ways to turn it around, creative solutions. I think a lot of those are being offered right now, in addition to talking about the funding. But that, of course, is one of the primary conversations that we're having around the budget.
Earlier this spring, you proposed privatizing SEPTA's operations, or at least a portion of those operations. How would that work?
Well, we would see a public-private partnership where there would still be a public element and private dollars, some private equity infused, and hopefully that would help sustain that system. I mean, is that something that's being considered right now in the overall budget? Probably not. My goal was to show that there are other ways to think about this problem, and I think we're going to continue to do that. We know that there has to be change to this system for it to be sustainable. Every 3-4 years coming back for almost $300 million. One day you're going to come back and the money's just not there. So we have to make this system sustainable. That was one idea that I threw out. There have been others. We just need to find the right balance.
How do you satisfy lawmakers on a transportation bill, particularly those that represent more rural areas that rely less heavily on mass transit?
But a lot of those same lawmakers acknowledge that transit is important, but the transit systems have to show that they themselves are willing to put their skin in the game, and increasing fares is part of it, reforming their system is part of it. And then also we need to look at the roads and bridges that are in our areas. That's part of the overall transportation infrastructure of Pennsylvania. So we're trying to be conscious of all of those things as we move forward to a finished product.
I'd like to talk about transportation now. Before serving as minority leader, you had chaired the House Education Committee. Last week, the Trump administration said it would withhold $230 million in congressionally approved money for school-related programs such as after-school programs, literacy training, etc. How will that affect the way that the state funds school funding this year?
We've had our own issues when it comes to funding. We had a court case. I was on the Basic Education Funding Commission. I believe that we're on a path that the funding is not an issue from the state level to our educational facilities. What is in play, though, is the fact that no matter what our funding stream looks like, there are still students who simply need an alternative. They don't perform well in whatever their current status is in their local public school. They need another option. So part of what we're looking for in this budget is to make sure that students and families have options when it comes to their kids' education. That's always going to be part of our conversation when we talk about funding as well. I think school choice needs to be a priority because there are kids who simply don't succeed in whatever, and regardless of the situation, it's not always the school's fault. Sometimes it's just the way kids learn. I'm a product of school choice. Many of the people in this building are, or at least have their kids who have that option. We need to ensure that that option is for all of the children in Pennsylvania so that they can graduate, they can really get the education they need to thrive here in Pennsylvania. So that's part of it, as well as the funding, as well as the reforms that we make to our educational system. But once again, I'm focused on that from the state level. To be quite frank, the less interference from the federal level, usually the better.
A school choice bill had moved through the Senate earlier this year. Is there any anticipation that the House will do the same?
I don't know if it'll be that exact bill, but we're working on those concepts every day.
The governor had also proposed standardizing funding for charter schools. Has there been any action on that issue?
Well, for cyber charter schools, a statewide rate, I certainly don't agree with. I think there are other ways that we can make reforms to the system, bring the formula in balance, and those are part of the conversations as well, and I would anticipate that. But I think it's also important to remember that we, for the first time in over 20 years, did have cyber charter reform in last year's budget, and some of those reforms are just now taking place. They weren't in the Auditor General's report. So I think it's also important to remember we did take a step last budget cycle, and we're still seeing the effects of that. So overall, I think we're moving in the right direction there.
The governor is again proposing to raise the minimum wage. Last month, you were criticized for some of your remarks on the floor, basically stating that not every wage is meant to be a living wage. A livable wage. Can you explain your comments?
Sure, it's true. My 16-year-old son working as a host at a restaurant is not meant to sustain a family on that wage. Someone who's retired, collecting a pension and taking a part-time job, working at a local church, doing their cleaning or handiwork, they're not intending to make that wage a livable wage. That's just a fact. So the idea that we're going to do this one size fits all thing when there are jobs out there that are not meant to support families, I think that's honest. However, people want to take those comments in whatever context, that's political, rhetoric that comes from that. But at the end of the day, it's the truth, and that's always something that I pride myself in speaking.
In June, the House passed the minimum wage bill that had varying rates based on county. What did you think of that concept?
I don't think I don't think it's workable. I understand the thought behind it, but we're talking about government mandated wages. And when you look around, the market will dictate the wage. That's really what it comes down to. And we need to have the workforce that can actually go into those jobs. That's what we need to be worried about creating. I think the market will take care of the wages.
The Governor Shapiro proposed a package of energy proposals, which he referred to as his lightning plan. Can you give your perspective on these?
Well, once again, it's about rhetoric matching action. I mean, I agree that we need to unleash our energy potential here in Pennsylvania, but the last thing we need to do is put more regulations on the industries that are going to be providing that energy. We need pipeline infrastructure. We need natural gas generation builds. We need these things. And to be quite frank, the governor's plan sets us back when he talks about replacing things like RGGI, the regional greenhouse gas initiatives, with PACER and PRESS, his versions of the same thing. That just more regulation, more taxation on these industries will not grow our energy product here in Pennsylvania. So while there are certain parts of the plan that I think we can look at, I think overall it just regulates too much, it taxes too much, and it stifles an industry that we're going to lose to other states.
As budget negotiations continue, can you give us your perspective on what you see as the greatest areas of contention and perhaps predictions on what you think may happen moving forward?
I'm not really in the prediction business, but I can say that the overall spend number that the governor proposed is simply too high, unsustainable. I think it really revolves around how we can get that number down. So the fight just isn't about this year's budget. This is about future sustainable budgets. This is about our kids, our grandkids being able to live and stay here in Pennsylvania so we can turn the demographics around of this state. And if we have unsustainable budgets that lead to massive tax increases, then you're going to lose those kids. So that's really what this fight is about. And I think we'll continue down the path of bringing that spend number down, bringing it more in line with what we can afford moving forward in the next few years. And we'll keep having those conversations. The other thing we have to do is grow the economy. A lot of what we have suggested at the budget table as House Republicans, we've been talking about it since the beginning of the year, is economic growth. You cannot tax or cut your way out of some of these issues. You have to grow the economy, unleash your energy potential, make sure you're creating good family sustaining jobs here in the Commonwealth. And so our policies that we've proposed really focus in that area, grow the economy, and then you don't have to worry about budgets moving forward.
How would you describe the tone of negotiations and the relationships between the governor and leaders?
Well, they're always tense this time of year. That's nothing new, and that's nothing new to this governor nor these legislative leaders. These are high stakes discussions that we're having about the future of Pennsylvania. I would expect them to be tense at times, but again, I'm pleased that the talks are still ongoing, and hopefully we can see some progress in the next days or weeks.
With House Republicans being in the minority, what do you do to ensure that your priorities are being heard?
You speak them. You talk about them, you show why they're important, and you use every tool that you have to make sure that your voice is heard. And I think we've been able to do that.
Representative Jesse Topper, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much. Good to be with you.